everyone. Welcome to our WIN meeting today. So very excited to be hosting this one today because I get to speak with Nancy Whiteman, and this is one of our Tales from the Top series. So if you guys have not seen this before, this is really quite incredible. And I get to spend an hour with Nancy, and we get to talk about all things journey-wise, how you start, how you grow a company and all this great stuff. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about WIN. And so for those of you who don't know what WIN is, it's the Women's Investor Network. We are part of the Arcview group, and we decided to really take a stance for women in cannabis. And we are championing, sorry, it's Monday, this movement to bring more women investors, companies, and products to the forefront of this industry. And we are redefining what investor means. And it's really those who are interested in this journey with us and promoting women, giving us a place for these great products with purpose, investing in women and women-run companies, and also supporting women entrepreneurs like Nancy in this industry. And we have a strong voice, and this is our platform. And so part of what we also do today is celebrate our partners. And today we have Soapbox Sample in, and they are our partner. So at the end of this webinar, they're going to be providing some incredible cannabis consumer insights. So I want to make sure you stay tuned for that. And we'll hear some sort of these key facts and figures about the edibles market in our cannabis industry. And also a reminder, there's a Q&A down here at the bottom of your screen. So please make sure you use that, because Nancy and I are going to be answering your questions at the end of this. Sarah's going to come back on and host that Q&A session. And then, of course, at the end of our program, and for those of you who are WIN members, we have our after party. And so we're going to kind of let our hair down, and we get to ask Nancy anything that we would like to. And so we get a chance to really get sort of personal with each other here at the end of this program. And so without much further ado, because she's got a lot more important things to say and to talk about today, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Nancy Whiteman. And she is the co-founder and CEO of Wana Brands. She's also been heralded as the Queen of Legal Weed, and that was in May of 2017 by Inc. magazine. She's also been named the Martha Stewart of edibles, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later today. I mean, what a moniker for that one. And that was done by Entrepreneur magazine back in 2019. So Nancy started Wana back 10 years ago. So we actually share an anniversary because the Arcview group also started 10 years ago. And life was a little different 10 years ago, I must say. But Wana is now the producer of top-selling cannabis-infused products, very diverse, including edibles, vapes, and extended release capsules. They have 4 different CBD THC ratios, as well as a variety of different dosages and onset timing and the duration of the effects and so forth. And their portfolio is really designed around health and wellness. So that's really important to Nancy, and we're going to talk about that also more today. So as I said, they're ranked the #1 brand in the United States. And this was done by BDSA in their 2019 report. And Nancy leads not only the strategic development, but also partnerships and licensing agreements. And she founded Wana Wellness Hemp Herbal Supplements, so she could leverage her expertise. She's an amazing woman. So let's hear more from Nancy about her and her company. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, well, same here. And what an incredible journey you've had just in this 10 years in the cannabis space. That is incredible. So I know you had a life before cannabis. So I want to hear about your journey, kind of what inspired you to start Wana. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Okay. Well, first of all, as you well know, Kim, 10 years in cannabis, we have a joke that every year in cannabis is like a dog year. So it's kind of like 70 years in cannabis. So, some days I feel every one of those 70 years. But my journey to cannabis is in some ways a little bit unorthodox because I didn't really set out to be a cannabis entrepreneur. Sometimes I refer to myself as the accidental cannabis entrepreneur. And so this, roll back the calendar 10 years, it's 2010. And what was happening was that I was at that point in my career leading a sales and marketing consultancy. I came out of a rather traditional business and marketing background. I have an MBA. I worked in corporate America for a long period of time. And then when we moved to Colorado, I started a sales and marketing consultancy and had been doing that for quite a while. And what I had been finding with consulting is that consulting can be a difficult type of business to scale because really what people are buying a lot of times is you. So
Right.
your income potential is limited to a certain degree by the number of
Mhm.
hours that you have to put into it or that you want to put into it or that you're physically able to put into it. And so I had always been very interested in founding a product focused business.
Mhm.
But I have to admit that cannabis was not the one that I was thinking about. So what ended up happening was my daughter had a friend over, and her friend's dad came over to pick her up, and we were talking. And her dad was in commercial real estate development, which was a tough place to be 10 years ago in Colorado.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was
Mhm.
just, asking him how things were going. And he told me that he had started a new business. And I
Mm.
asked what it was. And he said that he was making infused soda pop.
Hmm.
And although I was very familiar with cannabis, I was less familiar with sort of the legal market terminology. And so I actually said, infused with what? I actually didn't really know
Great.
what he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
talking about. And he said, infused with marijuana, which is what we called cannabis 10 years ago, right?
Right.
And so I said, oh, that is so cool. And long story short, my partner and I ended up building out a kitchen with him. It
Mm.
did end up being a relatively short-term partnership, as many of those early stage partnerships were. But I'm always grateful to him because he got us into the business. And honestly, it was a kind of an interesting thing because while I was familiar with cannabis, certainly recreationally, I actually didn't have that much knowledge about the
Mhm.
medicinal uses of cannabis. It wasn't that I didn't believe it; I just didn't really know much about it. Um, so it was a surprise to me, a pleasant surprise to me, when we started to get a lot of feedback from
Mhm.
customers on how much our products were helping them. And it really was after getting many of these that I started to realize the power of what we were actually doing, the power of this
Mhm.
plant, the power that it had to change people's lives for the better. And I got completely passionate and enraptured with the industry, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, so, but 10 years, I mean, you probably still have this today though, right? I mean, education is key to be able to, talk to your customer, take them through that journey as well and get them the information that they need. I could imagine, 10 years ago, I mean, where did you go 10 years ago to learn about the industry, right? And then why did you pick edibles? I mean, why was that your form factor?
Well, so let me unpack. There was several
Okay, sorry.
questions.
Yeah, I might go off script here a little bit because that's really interesting for me.
And I always joke that I have a mind like a sieve, so I have to grab onto what I
Yeah.
can. So
Okay.
let me start with the edibles question and work my way back. Why
Yeah.
edibles? Well, there's, as everybody knows, there's kind of three primary parts of the industry. There's
Mhm.
cultivation, which I am no farmer, have trouble
Mhm.
even keeping houseplants alive, so that one was not really going to be a possibility for me. And then there's processing or manufacturing, which is where we went. And then, of course, retail or owning a
Mhm.
dispensary. And the retail model was never sort of something that appealed to me. So there we were sort of in the processing piece of it. And edibles were sort of a natural fit. I love to cook. I have to admit
Mhm.
that confectionery products have never been my forte. In fact, never had actually ever made candy
Mm.
before. Um, but very much enjoyed cooking, could imagine building a business around that. And back in the day, one of the things about cannabis 10 years ago, Kim, you probably remember this, is that there was no analytical
Mhm.
information really.
Right.
So there was no guidepost to say, oh, this is going to be a popular category, or
Mm.
try this. This is bound to be successful. So Wana did what I think a lot of edibles companies did back then, which is that we just tried a whole bunch of stuff and sort of figuratively threw a whole bunch of stuff against the wall to see what would stick,
Yeah.
see what people
Yep.
wanted, see where the interest actually ended up being. And so it was a lot of trial and error. And that's one of the really interesting and fun things about the industry, is that it is really uncharted territory. And
Right.
so you really, you have to sort of have that personality that likes figuring things out from scratch.
Well, and I was going to say that's probably one of the very unique things about this industry. We all come into this usually from somewhere else and need to apply sort of learnings from what we've picked up along the way in our corporate careers and doing other things. So, what else has really sort of been unique for you, would you say, along this journey and starting this company and having to kind of figure things out as you've been going along, or tapping into other skill sets?
Well, my background is actually in marketing
Yeah.
and sales. So certainly I tapped into that tremendously. Um, I like to say one of the things about starting a company really from scratch, and we really started this company literally with two people, is that you grow up with it yourself. You learn
Hmm.
everything about the business yourself. And but coming from sort of a more traditional and larger corporate background, even when we didn't have the resources to execute or activate on a lot of things that I knew we should be doing, I at least had a sense of where we should be going. And
Hmm.
as we grew and got larger, that piece of it became obviously very helpful for me to be able to draw on.
Well, yeah. And, that's a really good point, because a lot of people too kind of get lost along the way, right? But it sounds like you had really kind of a place that you wanted to be with this and with this company, and I really do love the fact that you focused on wellness, because I would say too, a lot of early players weren't really into that as much. It was more higher THC concentrate and various other things. And so, to kind of see you, really stick to that sort of that thesis and really push on that was really inspirational for me, because I look at cannabis more as a wellness product than I do in other ways. And so, was there a lot of early competition for you 10 years ago?
Yes, there was, although I'd have to say I think it's even more so now, but
Yeah.
it's different now. What I would say about 10 years ago is that, and I'm talking specifically now about Colorado, which of
Yeah.
course was one of the earliest states to actually legalize, but um, there was a very, very, very low barrier to entry back in the day,
Hmm.
particularly when we started. There was no mandatory third-party lab testing for
Mm.
potency or residual solvents or contaminants or pesticides. There were no requirements for child-resistant packaging. There was no seed-to-sale tracking. There was no needing to have the THC logo on anything.
Mm.
So really, I used to joke about it that anybody who had an easy bake oven at home could could practically get into the industry. And the early products really showed that. You really saw a lot of sort of things that looked like people had baked it in their home oven, wrapped it up in some saran wrap, put it
Yeah.
in a backpack, and had gone dispensary to dispensary. So there was a lot of competition, but it wasn't high level competition, I guess is what
Hmm.
I would say. Many people at that point in time were not even doing third party lab testing.
Wow.
One of the things that I think was a stepping stone for WANA is that we were very committed right from the start to knowing exactly what we were putting in our products. So we always third party lab tested our oil right from the beginning.
Wow.
So we got a reputation for having very consistent products, which stays with us to this day. And that really distinguished us. Again, the bar was pretty low back in the day. So having a really consistent product was a very good entry place.
Hmm.
And then the competition sorted itself out, I guess I would say. As each of these requirements came into place, it stopped being an easy lark kind of a thing to do.
Mm.
You had to be
Yeah.
in a licensed kitchen that no other food products were made in. You had to be able to uh, dose your products precisely enough to make it through lab testing, which is its own, story in every market that we launch in. You had to be able to comply with Metric, which is our seed to sale tracking system. So little by little, a lot of the early players that were not really equipped to operate in a regulated environment fell off. Now, what
Mm-hmm.
has happened over time is more professional and sophisticated players have entered the marketplace. And so there is still a lot of competition. Back in the day, it was challenging to get on the shelves, but it was also sort of the spirit of, oh, sure, why not? We'll try you, right? We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yep.
You'd say in some ways it's become even harder now for a new brand to
Mm.
break in. It's very difficult to get on the shelves, particularly for the larger dispensary chains.
Oh, absolutely. And you did something different or a little bit unique, I would say, than maybe some others in this industry. You didn't take any outside capital. Is that right?
That is right. We
Oh,
bootstrapped the business,
okay.
and I'm very grateful for this, but we actually have been able to fund all of our growth organically. We have not
Wow.
needed to take any outside capital, and that has been, in many ways, it's a constraint, of course, but it's also a blessing. And let me focus
Mhm.
on the blessing part of it. Part of the blessing is that you end up really having to. Um, Treat every dollar in your business with great respect because it's all
Mhm.
ultimately your money at the end of the day. So
Right.
you are very careful with your money. And also, there's really nobody who has the right to tell you what to do, to
Mhm.
dictate strategy to you, or to suggest that you do things a certain way. You really get to make your own decisions and sometimes your own
Mhm.
mistakes. But that has worked out well for us to
Yeah.
be able to run our own race, if you will, and to not have investors who really do have the right, as part owners of the company, to have input on strategy.
Let me ask you about the flip side of that coin for a minute. So, I've had a lot of different startups, great investors, not so great investors along the way. Some that have really helped, accelerate the business because they have a personal interest in it, and some that have kind of really stood in the way of it growing because they had a personal interest and maybe that wasn't aligned. So I can see both sides of this.
Mhm.
So who do you go to then, Nancy? Who's your counsel? Like, do you have mentors or do you have an advisory or do you still have a board? I mean, what does your structure sort of look like, and who do you go to for those that help?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that I have really loved about the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and here now I'm talking more about Colorado just because it's our home state, and we're currently in 9 states plus Canada. So
Yeah.
I wish I could say this about every state that we're in, but we don't have the same intimacy, I guess I would say. But a lot of us kind of grew up in the industry together,
Mm.
and even though we're competitors, we're also friends. And
Mm.
a lot of times, it really was other owners of edible brands who I would turn to and say, "How are you guys thinking about this? What are you doing about this?" Um, and then, of course, it's always helpful to get out of the cannabis bubble. So you
Yes.
know, we're
Slightly different perspective
just
every once
have
in a
a
while from
different
that. Yeah.
perspective. I definitely drew on friends of mine who were successful in other industries and other businesses,
Yeah.
who are good. I would call them analogous thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know that your industry isn't facing this particular situation, but here's my situation. What would you do
Mm.
about it? So it has been a bit more informal.
Yeah.
We don't currently have a formal board,
Okay.
but I have many people who I would say have been enormously helpful to me and who I consider to be mentors.
Well, and let's go one more step deeper into that. So, being a woman in this industry, I'm sure has also, had some challenges along the way. Do you have women, mentors or supporters or things along? I mean, have you been able to tap into that as part of this industry? And have they been part of that inner circle, like you said, in Colorado?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes. I've been fortunate to make some very good friends, female
Hmm.
friends in the industry. And yeah, I mean, I think there is a special connection that female entrepreneurs have in general, and certainly in this
Hmm.
industry. So yeah, absolutely yes. There are many
Okay.
wonderful, bright women in this industry.
Yeah, and we always, I mean, this is sort of the tales from the top, right? We always talk about, breaking the glass ceiling and, all these other things. And I can tell from the awards that you've been, nominated for and have received, and the accolade. I mean, you've done things in the right way, right? In a lot of ways, to be able to be recognized by, Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur and everything. Those aren't cannabis magazines. So you've really stepped out of the industry and gotten recognition, which I think is really important as well. So let me ask you about this. What about like hiring people in and, sort of like building this team? I mean, you started out with two of you. I'm sure there's more now.
There's
So
true.
who is,
Yeah.
so how did you, so how get that team going, and who were kind of like the first or the next people you brought in besides you and the founding team?
You know, it's somebody once said this to me, and I think it's so true that being a founder CEO means that you're constantly firing yourself from various positions,
Right.
which is
Yes.
so, it's so very true.
Hmm.
So the first people that we brought in really were production people.
Okay.
What I certainly found is that although I might be a competent home cook, I am not an operations person, and I'm not a production line person at all.
Hmm.
So really the first people that we brought in were cooks. They were people who helped us label and package things. Um, we grew the business as needs dictated. And I think that again goes back to one of the things we were just talking about a second ago, is the difference between starting out with, a couple $1 million of other people's money versus starting out with your own, is
Yeah.
that you don't start out with sort of a theoretical org chart that you're plugging in for. You start, you see what you need, you hire what you need, you scale up to that, you hire some
Hmm.
people more. So it's all been very, very organic. I didn't even really have a C-suite until a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
And like you said, I mean, when you're every dollar counts, and it's, there isn't another one behind it necessarily, right? Those hires, you might spend a little bit more time on it. That's actually really good advice, I think, for people on the show today, because, sometimes we hire a little too fast. I always like to say hire long, fire fast, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with these people, and it's really an investment for the life of the company, right? If you think about that.
definitely.
So that's interesting. You mentioned other states, so tell me where Wana is now. Where are you guys?
Where is Juana? So, well, our home state is Colorado, of course.
Yep.
And then the first states that we focused on were Oregon was, I think, our first out of state market. And so currently today we're in Oregon, um, California, and Arizona. And then in the Midwest, we're in Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and Oklahoma. And then we're also in Maryland. And am I forgetting somebody? I hope not.
Wow.
And then we're in Canada, of course, and we're in the process right now of launching in Florida, Missouri, and Massachusetts. Will be in
Oh
2020,
my gosh,
and we're in
that's a
discussion
lot.
in several other states. It is a lot, and
Great though. Yeah.
it's a lot
Hmm.
because of how difficult it is to do business in this industry, where you
Yeah.
have to essentially start over in every market you go into, where you have
Mm.
to cultivate, process, and dispense all within the confines of that state. So we have grown our out of state business through licensing agreements. And to this point, although I keep the door open for the future, we have
Yeah.
not used the model of going and getting our own licenses and building out our own facilities. We've worked with partners in other markets. And the nature of those partnerships Looks a little bit different depending on the market that we're in. Some of them
Hmm.
are pure royalty-based licensing agreements. Others are sort of pure co-packing agreements. And then we have a number of hybrid situations. It's all a function of the structure of the market and
Okay.
what makes sense with that partner specifically.
So if you could choose one of those models, which one would you choose?
You know,
Like, what's the best model for you? If everything were standardized, right, across the country or what have you, what would that be? Would it be a licensing, or would it be the
well, if everything was
franchise?
standardized across the whole country,
You wouldn't need
we
it.
wouldn't be doing the whole
That's
state by
true.
state thing anyway. But there's not a simple answer to that, Kim. And the
Mm.
reason I'll go into a little bit more of the detail of what goes into why we structure things differently. But different situations sort of demand different solutions, if you will. So if we have a situation where we have a potential partner, for example, who we love and they're great operators and just really people that we feel
Mhm.
strongly with, um, they might already be producing a house brand and perhaps a
Mm,
house brand of gummies, right? In that situation, my feeling is it's better for us to put our own sales team in and our own
got it.
marketing team in.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really hard thing to ask a sales team to have to choose. And I don't care if
Mhm.
you're compensating everybody the same. At the end of the day, people tend to be loyal to who's signing their paycheck, right?
Right.
So in a situation like that, where everything lines up beautifully, we love the partner, but we don't feel that sharing a sales team makes sense. In that situation, the thing that makes sense for us is probably a pure co-packing or co-manufacturing agreement, where we put in our own sales team. In a situation where they have a great sales team but no competing product, it
Mhm.
might actually be more efficient for us to use their sales team. It also depends on just how many dispensaries there are in the state, right?
Right.
When we have a state that has, many hundreds of dispensaries, um, setting up a sales team to service that is a different proposition than the state that has 30 or 40 dispensaries. So there's no one size fits all answer that I have found yet.
Well, and there might not be for a while. We'll see how
Yeah.
everything sort of shakes out here in this United States of ours, and different ones. Are you looking at the New Jersey market right now? I mean, I hear that that's going to be quite a nice little foothold in the East.
Absolutely. I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Absolutely, I know. I know we've got what, 4 or 5 new ones coming online
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah.
and then probably the rest will topple soon thereafter.
Mhm.
Uh, I hear New Yorkers are going to go to New Jersey to buy
Yeah.
product, and that's not really sitting well. So that's going to be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so, any other things? So, our audience, a lot of people out there, not all of them, a lot of women startup companies. So, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, you jumped from having a successful career, being in these different things, now starting this. What advice would you give someone just starting out in the cannabis space right now?
Oh, there's there's so much that I have learned primarily by making a lot of mistakes. So I'm always hopeful that
Well, there's a
I'm always
lot of
hopeful
valuable
that I
life
can do
lessons we
something.
learn along the way, but
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Well, first of all, what I would really say is think about what part of the industry is the best fit for you.
Okay.
I gave you a little bit of sort of how I ended up in the edible space,
Yeah.
right? But for other people, that might not be a good choice. There's so many opportunities also in the ancillary spaces. It doesn't have to be a plant
Hmm.
touching business. Secondly, I would say, really know yourself. First of all, there's people who I would say uh, would do better in businesses that are a little bit more mature and a little bit more
Mm.
established because they are people who uh, will be tremendously successful following some tried and true procedures, right?
Right.
If you're somebody who doesn't like having to start over a lot,
Mm.
who doesn't like dealing with constant change that you're not in control of having to sort of make things up as you go along, I would say cannabis probably really isn't your industry. You really have to have a high tolerance for risk,
Hmm.
high tolerance for change, a lot of persistence, and a lot of resilience. So those would be sort of my two
Yeah.
baseline things that I would say is choose where you really fit and where you have value to add and know yourself. And then I would say that it's not 10 years ago anymore. You have to really have a plan. You
Right.
and probably now, unless you are fortunate enough to have a lot of independent wealth, it would be probably fairly hard to bootstrap at this time and come in
Yeah.
at a any kind of level playing field, if you will.
Hmm.
So I think you need to get your funding figured out. And then I would say, and this is specifically my advice on the brand side, is really have a vision for your brand.
Mm.
Know who it is that you want to be. Uh, I don't, and brands evolve over time. So it's not like I don't mean to imply that day one you start out and you've got everything nailed down and it never changes because there's no brand that is like that. You know, if you read,
Hmm.
trying to think of, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is the Nike story, right? What
Yeah.
you really see is Nike didn't start out being the Nike that we know now. Nike started out as like, the dream of a passionate runner for
That's right.
a better running shoe, right? And
Hmm.
so brands evolve, but you have to have something right from the start, I think, that is uniquely yours. Um, it's it's too late for another Me Too brand, in my opinion. You either have to have a product differentiator, you need to have something that really sets you apart because it's wildly competitive out there. And I think without that, I think you face a truly uphill battle. So those would be some
Yeah.
of the thoughts.
No, and I agree with that. And something that came out just I think last week was the McPlant, right? And I use that as kind of maybe not the best analogy here, but it is an
It's
analogy.
not that
And
plant,
I
though.
mean, McDonald's, instead of going and buying up Impossible Burger or one of the other ones that had been established in this industry, they said, screw this, we're coming out with the McPlant. And we could see by the stock prices of these other ones that really hit them hard. And so how do you feel about that as being in this cannabis space, right? And having this great brand, do you think you're gonna get a, McPlant problem here? Or do you think there's room for being acquired? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, it's so funny that you're bringing that up because literally just this morning we were talking about CPG companies,
Hmm.
and that I think that there can sometimes be a feeling when you reach a certain size and scale, like, what do we need a brand for? We could do
Right.
anything we want. We could be McPlant, right?
Hmm.
Um, but what I would say is that um, cannabis is not just another snack food. It's not just another CPG product. This is a medicine, and
Hmm.
it has health and wellness components, and it has psychoactivity aspects to it. These are not things that you wake up one morning having expertise in, right? We've spent
Hmm.
10 years going deep, deep, deep into this, understanding the plant as well as we possibly can, spending countless days and hours and dollars trying to develop the most innovative products that we can, really understanding everything from the importance of plant genetics to extraction to how we recombine things to how we add functional ingredients. These are skill sets that are developed over time. So
Hmm.
I would say, again, I know you were not intending that McPlant be a direct analogy, but I'm going to make an analogy. But I do think that it would behoove a larger company who wants to get into cannabis to find a brand that already has demonstrated some expertise in this area and
Yeah.
to not make the assumption that this is going to be a no-brainer to figure out on your own.
No, I agree with that. And we were laughing earlier during one of our calls about, Martha Stewart, right? I mean, case in point, right? She just came out. She's got her, CBD brand. And what did you say? She's saying to have like 20, 30 gummies at a time or something. I don't remember the quote. Maybe you could tell me what that is.
So she was, first of all, of course, as you mentioned at the beginning, Entrepreneur did call me the Martha Stewart of
Yes.
cannabis. So of course, when I found out that Martha Stewart was in cannabis, I said, wait, you can't do that. I'm already the Martha Stewart of cannabis.
That's
Of course,
right.
she's Martha Stewart, so I guess she can do whatever she likes. The article that I was referring to, and I unfortunately don't remember where I saw it, but she was talking about how delicious her CBD gummies are and how
Mhm.
you could eat 20 of them. And it kind of made me gasp, honestly. And goes back to the point, Kim, that we were just talking about.
Mhm.
This is not a snack food.
Right.
This is a medicine. And it has to be treated seriously. It is a plant
Mhm.
medicine. We wouldn't even tell anybody go ahead and eat 20 vitamin C gummies, right? Hopefully you won't hurt yourself. Your body
Right.
will excrete out what you can't use, but it's that sort of attitude where there, I believe, is reflective of a lack of understanding of the plant itself and the properties of the plant itself,
Yeah.
and a deep appreciation for that. I think if you had that deep appreciation, you probably wouldn't be giving that particular type of advice.
No, that's a great point. It isn't candy. It isn't a snack food. We're using this for our health and wellness, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I wouldn't pop 20, gummy vitamins, and I would certainly, be cautious if somebody maybe who said that. Sorry, Martha, but just going to call it as we see it. I want to talk about something else too, as had mentioned, building this company and growing and, doing all these things. I want to talk about failure. We don't talk enough about that. I believe as well, first women, I think we've been really, it's been hard for us to get ahead and do things. And, we certainly didn't want to talk about things we didn't do right necessarily. But we all have a failure or failures. In my case, I've had quite a few of them. And, you learn from them and you pick yourself up and you do it again, maybe differently this time. So why don't we talk about that? Do you have one that sort of stands out for you?
Where do I begin?
Pick one. Just
Well,
yesterday.
I'm going to choose one of my favorite early failures of Juana,
Okay.
which is, as I mentioned earlier, because there was back in the day no analytics companies to kind of give us
Mhm.
clear direction. We were just trying a whole bunch of things. One of the things that we tried early on was a beef jerky, an infused beef jerky. And
Oh
there's
boy.
an
Okay.
expression, I'm trying to remember, it kind of goes something like, those who respect the law and enjoy eating sausages should never watch either one of them being made. And I'm going to add infused beef jerky to that list.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So we certainly had more than our share of
Yeah.
products that we tried that
Mhm.
went nowhere, that never took off. I'm a big believer in, I think he was an architect, Mies van der Rohe, his expression, less is more. I'm a
Mhm.
big believer in less is more. When we have SKUs that are not performing well,
Mhm.
we take them off the market. So there's that level of failure, if you will.
Mhm.
I don't even, in my mind, I don't even necessarily put those into the failure categories. They're just things that didn't work out. They were
Right.
learning experiences, right?
Right.
I think the quote unquote failures, and I would still put these in the learning experience things, but the ones that have over the last 10 years given me the most pain and have caused me the most heartache, they all tend to be around people. And
Mm.
you know, disappointments that you have with employees or partners or things where you said to yourself, oh, I saw some red flags there and I didn't listen to them.
Yeah.
And now I'm dealing with this very
Mhm.
difficult situation. And I do think as women, we very much take these things to heart.
Yeah.
We want to, by and large, be in harmony with other people. And when we're not,
Mhm.
it's a deep thing. I don't know if you find that too, but
Oh,
you know,
absolutely. Yep.
that's
Mhm.
probably my failures, if I'm going to call them that, have been maybe my own failure to listen to my own instincts on
Mm.
situations. Um, so, I think that failures are also all about learning. They're
Yeah.
also all about, and I really do try to instill this philosophy in the company is that when something goes wrong, the last thing I ever want is to be pointing fingers or to have anybody else pointing fingers what we really do is we get together and we say, well, that didn't work out the way we wanted. What did we learn from this? What would we do differently next time?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's how you take a quote unquote failure and you turn it into something positive.
Well, and I like what you said there too. I mean, it isn't a particular person or thing. It could have just been the circumstance. Maybe the world wasn't ready for, beef jerky, right? Maybe they would be today. I don't know. But sometimes a lot of it is timing and it's, the approach to something. And so I agree with that. And yeah, I think as women, we take it very personally. I think sometimes when, an employment situation doesn't work out or, a person doesn't show up the way that we were expecting. And, it is a tough thing. And I don't know if we want to lose that, because that's the other side of that, is that we do care very deeply. And, we want our team to do better than we do, in a lot of ways. That's very interesting about that. Well, I was going to ask you a counterpoint to that question, which is, like, if you could go back in time and give your 10-year-old self some advice, what would you say to your 10-year-old self?
Don't be afraid, and don't be afraid of failure specifically. I think that holds people back so much. Oh, what if I don't succeed at this? What will people say? What will I think about myself? What will my friends and family think? I always joke about this, but it's true. And I joke about it as it relates to cannabis, but it's true for everything. Sometimes it's better not to know what the future has in store for you. Because honestly, if somebody had told me 10 years ago all the things that I was going to go through in the process of building WANA, I probably wouldn't have done it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to take a risk and do things and keep moving forward. And don't be afraid, and don't judge yourself too harshly. And I love what you just said about the timing. I always laugh because I use this example. It's a great cannabis example. When we first started out in Colorado, it was totally a medicinal market. And of course, the only way you could get THC back in the day was if you were a dispensary, you could have your own grow, but it was limited by the number of patient count that you had. And if you were a MIPS or a manufacturer, you could have your own grow. And it was limited to a certain number of plants. But we didn't have our own grow. And so our first several years were very constrained just because we didn't have enough THC. And I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't we put a grow in right away? Oh, it's so stupid. Why didn't I do this differently? And then, of course, the market changed and it went to rec. And now I can buy THC far more cost effectively than I could grow it without distracting us from our core business. So what looked to be a terrible mistake then was a timing issue, right? It didn't turn out to be a long-term mistake, even though it looked like it earlier. So I really like that point you just made.
No, that's an excellent point. You're absolutely right. And had you gone into grow, your business might have been completely different than it is today, right? Because you were self-supporting. So you would have had to make other choices, putting money over here versus over there. We talked a little bit about data. So how do you use data right now? Or do you?
Oh, we're
like you might.
We're total nerds. I'm always joking about what a bunch of nerds we are. But we use data constantly. We're very, very data focused. We use data in some pretty straightforward ways. Certainly, whenever we're coming out with new products, we're doing a lot of analysis on pricing to figure out where we need to be coming in. We use, industry level data. We also do a lot of just talking to our customers and that kind of data. We also do a lot of data mining of our own internal data we run on SAP. And so there's more data than you can shake a stick at. In fact, we're in the process of
good for you.
Hiring a data analyst. That's how much I believe in data.
Yes.
But without being in control of your numbers and being in control of your data, you're kind of guessing a lot, and you don't need to, and it's very inefficient. So we're very, very data driven.
That's great. And keep saying, well, it depends on who you ask, though. I guess numbers don't lie. I could expand on that, but I won't. I'm not going to get political or anything. But sometimes the data is just there, and no matter how you keep recounting it or recasting it, it's kind of the same. So, so what does the next 10 years of WANA look like for you?
Well, there's a couple of key drivers for WANA. One is continuing our geographic expansion. I often say to my team, and I'm sure they're sick of hearing me say it, that it's almost, not quite, but it's almost as much work to launch in a small market as it is to launch in a large market. So we don't try to cover off on every single state that's legal. It's just not efficient for us to do that at this point in time. That'll change in the future as regulations change. But choosing the right markets, very, very critical to us. One of the things, of course, about producing in Canada is that it gives us an avenue to potentially export product from one legal country to another legal country. Okay. So certainly our geographic expansion, and not just getting in there with our gummies, which is our core product, but then really building those markets out. Secondly, and this I really believe will be the big differentiator for cannabis companies in the future, is focusing on innovation in our R&D pipeline. And we have a very, very robust R&D pipeline, a lot of stuff in the works, a lot of very interesting, unique products that are very focused on effect. Unlike perhaps some other companies, we don't try to cover off on every category, every product form. We have a few product forms that we feel very strongly about, that we think give a lot of flexibility. And what we focus on really is thinking about all the various variables that people want in a cannabis product. So product form is one of them, certainly. Flavor is one of them, certainly. But so is dosage amount. So is onset. Some people, we came out with an incredibly successful quick onset product back in March in the middle of the pandemic, added 30% to our sales without cannibalizing our core product.
Wow, great.
Yes. So onset is definitely part of it. THC and CBD ratios are part of it, right? Giving people the flexibility that they want there. Giving people flexibility in terms of different cannabinoid mixes and ratios and functional ingredients.
Big time. Yeah.
That's really what we're focused on, is how do we help people have the exact cannabis experience that they want to have.
Yeah, so dial it in. Absolutely. I agree with that. And it's personal.
Yes, exactly. The third category I would say is CBD. We also started WANA Wellness about a year ago, and it is our hemp-focused company, certainly leveraging the WANA brand's reputation and expertise. But I felt it was just so important to do that, because I think this distinction that we make right now between THC and CBD is a point in time. At some point, this is all going to be cannabinoid medicine, and we need to have expertise in all of it and the flexibility to go in a lot of different directions with it.
That's fantastic. I see Sarah's here. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry to stop the conversation, but we have so many questions. So I'm just going to hit you guys with a couple right now, and then we'll continue in the after party for the members, if that's okay. But let's get a couple of these going. So this is from Lisa, and she says, I'm a senior and newer to edibles. While focusing on wellness, how do you approach dosing in your production to remain reliable and consistent?
That is a great question. So one of the good pieces of news, Lisa, is that it's not 10 years ago. Hang on, I'm getting a poll coming up here. Let me just close this, because at least for me, it's covering my face. So the good news is that the vast majority of markets now require third-party testing for potency. So now you should be able to get a lot of information just from looking at the label and seeing what the dosage is on the product. It still does require some skill on the part of the manufacturer, even within the testing regulations, to make sure that it's truly consistent. because there's other things that impact the experience that you're going to have in addition to dosage, including things like terpene mix and the strains that you're using and the ratios. So for starters, you can look at the dosage. In terms of approaching your own dosing, I always encourage people who are new to cannabis to start low, go slow, start low and go slow, right? So always start with an extremely small dosage if you're new to it. I would, if the 10 milligram gummies or not gummies, edibles or products are what's most available in your own marketplace, I would cut it probably in a quarter and start with maybe 2.5 milligrams. Please wait at least an hour. I'd say wait 2 hours and see how you feel before you take any more, and go up slowly from there. What you're always aiming for from a health and wellness perspective is the lowest effective dose that you can find, right? So you need to experiment with that. Everybody's body is different. Everybody has different responses to the psychoactivity of the product. And it can be influenced even by the type of meal that you've just eaten. It will bind to fat, for example. So if you've had a rich meal, you may find that you feel the impacts of the product more. Even if the manufacturer has done their job and made it perfectly consistent, if you take it on an empty stomach one day, you take it after a rich meal the second day, you may have different effects on it. So those are a couple of thoughts on dosing.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you, Nancy. And then this is from Francis. How has being a woman been advantageous in business? Because we talked about the flip side, but has it helped in any way?
Yeah, I absolutely think it helps. And I'm going to share just candidly that I did go through a period of time where I almost felt like a little resentful would be overstating it, but I felt like, oh, I get all this feedback about being a woman CEO. And sometimes I just want to be acknowledged for being the CEO of a company that's doing well, is incredibly profitable, all those things that you want a CEO to do. But I've really changed my attitude about it because I've spoken at a lot of events and I've had a lot of feedback from women, sometimes younger women, but often women, older women, women my age, who say that it was meaningful for them to see a woman speaking and to see a woman in my position. And that it is, and we've heard that a lot, for example, in the last couple of weeks around the election, the importance of young girls of color, seeing Kamala Harris, for example, being the vice president elect, and how meaningful it is to see yourself reflected in the world. So a little bit of a preamble to that. In terms of how being a woman has been helpful to me, I think that there are qualities that women tend to have more than men. And I hate talking in broad stereotypes because certainly there are men who would fall into these categories as well. But I think that being a woman has been to my advantage because I embrace the qualities of leadership that people associate, I think, with women. I'm very collaborative. I try to be incredibly respectful of people. I want to be inclusive, and I think that has created a really positive work environment. We have voluntary turnover of less than 5% a year. So something is going well in terms of our corporate culture because people want to stay. So I think, I don't know if the question was, do people defer to you or treat you differently because you're a woman? I don't know that I think of it that way, but I do think of being a woman is an advantage if you are able to embrace those qualities that people associate with female leadership.
Absolutely. No, I love that answer. And our last question, and like I said, we'll get to some more of these on the after party for the members, but when you mentioned that choosing the right states to branch into next, what are some of the top things you base that decision on?
Great question. So usually when a state opens up, it usually starts with medical. So some of the things that I'm talking about are specific to medical, but what I'm certainly looking at is, for starters, total population size of the state. Then I look at allowable conditions. And those two things together give me a sense of what the addressable population will probably be in terms of people who can get medical cards in that market. I look at who's allowed to prescribe. You have a state like New York where they were initially incredibly restrictive with who was allowed to say, yes, you qualify for a medical card or you don't. So those are three things that I look at. I look at the structure. Is this going to be an unlimited license market, or is it going to be a limited license market? Because that can influence things. And then I get out the crystal ball. I say, what's the likelihood of this turning into a rec market sometime in the foreseeable future? So those are some of the key things that I'm looking at.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Nancy and Kim. That was such a great presentation. I'm just going to chat with our partner for a couple of minutes, and then we're also going to have a poll that is popping up. If you can just fill that out and help us with a lot of our programming and things like that. But thank you again, Nancy. We'll see you in a couple of minutes, and we'll chat further with you. So I am so happy and excited to have Jacqueline. I'm like Kim said, it's Monday. Jacqueline Rosales, CEO of Soapbox Sample. So Soapbox Sample measures trends in consumer behavior and preferences and provides quick turn insights for testing products, concepts, and advertising. Their dedicated cannabis research division offers expert guidance for brands from all parts of the cannabis ecosystem. So Jacqueline, welcome back. We're so happy to have you again.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
So, Nancy was chatting with us earlier about that incident with Martha Stewart giving some dubious advice about edibles. So the edibles market has been in the news a lot lately, just with all the different form factors coming out and the different states embracing it more. So can you share with us some insights and data about that edibles market and just overall consumers that your company has gathered?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, Nancy. So I was, as Nancy was talking and she was making statements, I'm like having a conversation with her myself. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's true. 47% of consumers actually said that. So it's really exciting to hear, the connection of consumer data and how it's actually applied. There was another part that really spoke to me. And I know this is going to sound weird, but at the point where we're talking about hiring data analysts, right? And so for us as researchers and market researchers and taking, a 50-year-old traditional market research focused business and really shifting our focus in this category, it was just very interesting to hear, oh my gosh, we're finally making it. You talk about those dog years. And and where it was really a free for all, like if you had your easy bake oven, you made your product, you walked into the local dispensary, it was wrapped in plastic with some weird like label from your printer, and there it was in the little, case. And that's not the case anymore, right? It's where real businesses with real growth opportunity, and that means we need to operate as such, so we think about, a lot of real entrepreneurialism in this category. But one of the things we heard was also, people coming from different backgrounds, right? So a lot of us have different corporate backgrounds or going business backgrounds or research backgrounds. And now here we are all in this category. But for edibles specifically, I saw someone asking, all right, well, how does it look for women? And people talk about men a lot. And, one of the things that's really interesting is that, women are, somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% more likely to say that they're interested in using edibles or consuming edibles as their main consumption method, right? So it's really important too, as brands, that we're not only looking at just delivery methods and where our category is and what our positioning is, but also the differences even within the consumers within our segments. We were talking about the Martha Stewart. I don't know if it was the same article or a different article I read, but it opened up saying CBD has reached peak white lady at meditation retreat levels of bougie wellness, followed by Martha Stewart eats up to 20 CBD gummies a day or whatever the case was, and those things also frighten me, right? Nancy said, oh, that makes me really nervous. And, we are also seeing in our data, just in the last couple months, an increase where we're now at like a 10% increase among cannabis consumers, again, saying that's their preferred delivery method. And there's a couple different reasons for that. People are at home. There's a large percentage of cannabis consumers that have children at home. And edibles offers them a way to consume, without having to be out in public. But also when you're talking about the wellness, right? And now with COVID and the pandemic, and we're really in a position where we're probably going to come up on March, and it's going to be like a year into this thing. And so think about sleep patterns and stress and all of these other things that are going on. So even those folks that were in that consideration category, right, have now popped over and said, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. Right. And that's why we're also seeing like a real openness and increase, especially within, those CBD products, because I call them sort of like they're just it's all elevated by COVID and the pandemic. So when we get to the point where we have the combination, right, of the wellness, and then also wanting even some anxiety relief and social relief and sleeping relief, we're really in a good spot right now. So it's exciting to hear some of the stuff Nancy's talking about.
I love that. And then Jacqueline, tell me, how do you go about getting your data? How do you gather it?
Oh gosh, yeah. So we're a consumer data company. We focus specifically on consumer data insights as one of our main divisions. And we own populations, very large populations across the United States, and we survey them. We have all kinds of products. Some of the stats you saw up on the screen there, those are our bi-weekly poll that we have been running now for over a year, measuring the trends in cannabis consumers and behaviors. We recently published a journal called N=Pandemic. That's like a year worth of behavior, including cannabis behavior. And we do a lot of specialized ad hoc work too in this space. We have brands coming to us. We now even have an entire legal department, and we partnered with UCLA to understand how we can do research. And we've successfully executed our first edibles taste test, where we did recruit consumers to consume cannabis that did have THC, and to do some journaling, testing some fast action, new technology in there. And so, is it the first time that I think from a research firm perspective that we were able to execute something like that, actually 500 consumers. So in the middle of COVID, and we got shut down, our facility, not because we were doing anything wrong, but because we live in LA and everything was shut down. So we also then had to deliver the cannabis samples to the consumers for them to test. I mean, it was absolutely crazy.
That sounds about right in the cannabis world.
Yeah, what research can do. And like Nancy said, you really need to take a look at these things before you go out into the market, because we're not we're not where it's an easy entry anymore. Right.
Absolutely.
So those things, those little mistakes are going to cost a lot of money now.
And so one last question. So I know in the past on your surveys, you've asked some different questions. And one was, if you could infuse cannabis into any household product, what would it be? So what are a couple of the stranger things that you've heard from that?
Oh my gosh. We've heard anything you can think of, from cereal to intimacy products. Basically anything that's part of everyday routine. I was looking at this other infographic that we produced that we didn't share, and it was looking at day part use, right? And it was like from morning all the way to night. And it was like interesting with CBD, it was 26% in the morning, and then it's pretty even, like 14%, 18, 14, 15, talking about like before work, during work, after work, evening. But that's interesting too. It's like all day parts, right? When people are actually going to come in and consume. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline. If anybody would like to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
Oh, geez. You can reach us at info@soapboxsample.com.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And just have a couple closing remarks. So we really appreciate everybody coming to the program and listening to Nancy. If you're interested in becoming an Arcview member, we have individual memberships or corporate memberships as well. So please reach out to win@arcviewgroup.com for more information. Additionally, for those who are joining us at the member after party, please stay on and we will activate your videos so you can chat with Kim and Nancy, Jacqueline, and some other folks on the line. And we just want to thank you again. We look forward to seeing you virtually in 2 weeks for our special edition Win and Miss Grass Holiday Shopping Edition. So don't forget to check out the 9 brands that are featured on the Miss Grass website in the Arcview curated shop. They are Win members, and we are so excited for that partnership as well. So thank you to everybody. And like I said, if you're an Arcview member, stay on the line and we will promote you over and turn on your videos so you can chat. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nancy. That was great.
That was really great. All right, so Erica's going to start moving people over, and we actually have a decent amount of questions too. If you're okay answering them, Nancy?
Yes, of course.
Okay, perfect. So I can even kind of just run with those as well. All right.
Do I need to go anywhere? I'm just here, right?
No, you're good. Hey,
Okay.
Gail. Hi,
I'm here.
Jean.
Yay.
It's Jean's birthday.
Happy birthday, Jean.
Love it. And you're still working, Jean. Come on. Come on.
Kim told me she didn't want to see my face. I said, sorry. Nancy, welcome. Thank you for today. It's been so much fun for me to hear you tonight, as well as I got to meet you at South by sometime in the last year, I think, last year. And how wonderful. What a great story. And thanks for being part of our making our event tonight. Thank you so much. What a wonderful story and journey and success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nice
And plus, I was there at the MJ Biz conference in Vegas when you were honored as the, queen. It was such a nice honor that they awarded you. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was a happy night.
yes, it was a wonderful event, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So it was interesting because Kim, we were even talking about something that you mentioned, Nancy, about that whole female CEO. Kim, remember that conversation? We actually had that a couple of weeks ago, how you were like, sometimes I just wanted to be an investor. I didn't want to be a female investor, or a CEO. I didn't want to be a female CEO. And it was interesting that you touched upon that too, because Kim and I were just talking about that individually.
Yeah.
It's true. But I think, what you did say, that it's good to have those figures and be out in the public and having, someone that these, women can relate to as well. So it's really interesting.
Well, and I had a question for you, Nancy. I mean, getting into this industry, did you feel like you were apologetic to some people? Like, I don't know, like when I first was talking to some of my colleagues, right? And I said, I'm getting into the cannabis space, and I was waiting for their reaction, and I feel like I still kind of do that sometimes. Like I'll say, I started because of this reason and because of, and I feel like I got to keep telling that story. I don't know. Did that happen to you, or did you be like, screw it, I'm in it?
No, actually it didn't, so again, this was 10 years ago. So I have 2 children and they were both school age at that point. Now they're young adults, but I was very cautious about who I told what I was doing. And frankly, there was a lot of judgment. And I'm in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado, which is a pretty liberal area. But, sometimes people would ask me at a party what I did, and I would tell them, and they would kind of get a disapproving, harumphy kind of a face and would find a reason that they needed to go talk to somebody else. So things have changed a lot. Now I'm completely, as we say, out of the cannabis closet, but it would take a while.
Absolutely. And
now
so
I heard that everybody asks for free samples. Do you get that?
Oh yeah.
I get progress.
Yes. And what does your house look like in terms of products? I like asking people that. Do you just have like a whole cabinet of Wana that you can choose from when you go in, or?
I do. I do.
I'm coming over, Nancy.
A lot of what I have actually is, I experiment on myself a lot, so I'm not a great sleeper, for example. So I'm always experimenting and layering different products. And so I have some wanted tincture. We just came out with an amazing quick tincture. I'll try a little bit of that, and then I'll have some of our CBD gummies, and I have, some indica and, a 2-to-1. And, I wear a Fitbit. So I track my sleep score every night. And I actually really do keep track of it and try to, provide input in terms of what's working for me.
That's great.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump into just some of the questions that we didn't get to in the program. So this was from Marla. I see you on, Marla. So I'm an RN, MSN writer, and for 4 years a grower with a small business focused on medicinal cannabis. I stopped growing, but want to be active in the business and not sure where to put my energy. I find online magazines tend to be male dominated and youth focused. Any advice?
Ooh. So you like to grow and you like to write, huh? Well,
Arcview, Marla. Just kidding.
I don't know as much about the cultivation side of the business as I might, but it does strike me that, on the cultivation side, I often think about where's the future of cultivation going. And what I do tend to think is particularly, sort of post-legalization, that we're going to see a lot of cannabis being grown outdoors in warm climates where they can do multiple harvests a year. But I also think that there's always going to be a place for more boutique-y, fine sort of craft cannabis that will probably be grown indoors, and that will depend very heavily on genetics. So I think that the whole area of genetics and starting with plants that come equipped entourage effect wise with the mix that you want is a very interesting area of the industry that has not been completely saturated at this point.
Absolutely. And from our end, we have seen a number of female cultivators coming into the mix. So a couple WIN members actually have cultivation businesses. And then, yes, Marianne, I see, yeah, you are one of them. And actually, so on Instagram, I know social media is a weird thing, but there are a lot of female growers on there. So just for example, I think like Humboldt Seed is actually owned by women, Scissor Sisters Estates, that's a female led one. So it's interesting because I think women are maybe getting a little more creative about putting themselves out there, whereas the the legacy cultivators kind of hid behind the shadows more, but there are a lot more women kind of coming to the forefront. So it's interesting. And then let's
do it now.
All right. And then there was one. Okay. So Nancy, you were saying, you were more medically focused and things like that. So we had a question that if there was someone at the point of sale in a dispensary who had more training on that medical side, do you think it would lead to an increase in sales in general? Because I think it does have a lot to say with a lot of the bud tender education and what they're actually selling. I mean, I've gone in sometimes, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. You actually don't, so that's an interesting point. How do you guys, I guess it's a twofold question. Do you think that would be helpful? And how do you educate, for PADs and things like that?
Yeah, I can't overstate how important I think education is. And I think that because of the structure of the industry at this point in time, even with COVID, which is making it less likely in some markets that people are actually going in and spending time in dispensaries, I still think that the bud tenders are our first line of defense in terms of getting good information out there. So one of the things that WANA focused on early on was bud tender education and training, and not just on WANA products. We have a whole host of interactive training modules for bud tenders on everything from, sort of Cannabis 101, how the plant is grown, to the basics of the endocannabinoid system, to what are terpenes anyway, to, a whole bunch of sort of staple sort of things that people should know. But it becomes particularly important as we start moving into more sophisticated products. And I do think that one of the reasons that our Wanna Quick products, our quick onset gummies, did so well is that we put a huge emphasis on bud tender training and really explaining and educating around how it is that a quick onset product works, how it's metabolized differently than a classic edible is, why you get sort of a delta 9 or inhalation high rather than a 11 hydroxy high, which is when it goes through the liver to be metabolized. And they were just sponges. And have by and large done a tremendously good job of carrying forth good information to our customers. So I do believe that if education is done correctly, it's incredibly powerful. And I really would encourage everybody to look at our Instagram page if you're not signed up for it, because we've started to do a series of short educational videos with Mike Hennessy, who's our VP of Innovation. He's also just a funny guy. But what I think we have started to move towards are very quick format, 1 or 2 minute formats that explain complex technical concepts in a fun, entertaining, easy to grasp way. And I think it's absolutely critical. Everybody in the industry needs to be moving the whole industry forward in terms of education.
That's great. Does anybody have any questions? I have a couple more from the program, but anybody that's on the screen right now? All right, so I'll keep asking these though. But all right, so this is from Kirsten. Have you thought about using AI to help assist you with data gathering?
Ooh, that's next level nerdum. We're not quite there yet. But we have talked to a couple of vendors who are starting to use AI. I think we're not quite there just yet. But I do think it's actually, there's a big, wide open category of stuff that needs to be done. And one of the things that I think AI could be really helpful with is helping to professionalize the gathering of effect-based information. So when people are actually trying products, and specifically products that are formulated to have specific effects, do we have efficient ways of capturing that so that medical professionals can be reviewing that information, brands can be reviewing that information? So we're not there yet, but it'll be coming, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And then this is from George. I see you on there, George. Can we discuss the beef jerky fail, please? Food spoilage, inaccurate absorption for dosing, packaging. So what was the actual issue? And feel free to elaborate, George, if you have more on that question. But yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
So actually, what actually ended up happening was that the beef jerky thing sort of got answered for us, which is that there turned out to be a whole other level of regulation around dealing with meat products that we were not actually really truly prepared to comply with. It was a cumbersome product to make. It was one of those things that sounded really cool and unique. And where's the lady from soap samples?
Jacqueline, yes, I know. It's like so many words.
I was giggling when I heard you say that people say, oh yeah, put it in cereal, put it in this, put it in that. And that was exactly 10 years ago. People were doing all this crazy stuff. There was pizza infused barbecue sauce and pizza, cannabis pizza and cannabis baklava. And I have to laugh because, people will say that. And but the truth is, when you look at the data, what the data tells us is that people like certain formats more than they like others, specifically gummies. Gummies account for 84% of the candy portion of the edibles market. Candy, is probably you all know, is by far the largest category within edibles. So why are gummies so popular? Well, first of all, they're well known because we've got used to them with our vitamins. But they also are just discreet, and they're a small amount of sugar. And so going back, George, to your question about the beef jerky, I think it was a product form that sort of wasn't really meant to be. And I actually think most product forms really are not meant to be. Why not have the most delicious pizza that you can buy and then have a gummy if you want to enjoy the experience of cannabis? Why put cannabis into everything that you consume? That's one woman.
I don't disagree with that. Just a quick follow-up. So you're saying it was not so much an issue of the complexity of making it or complexity of dosing, but it was more about the fact that there's like spoilage issues is one question. And then the other question is more largely than just beef jerky versus gummies. Are you suggesting that whether it's in or outside of WANA, you don't think that there's a large market that wants savory edibles? They're more interested in sweets, whatever format or however natural that honey or maple syrup or turbinado, pave, patafui. The point is sweets is more realistic going forward. I know WANA has 80% gummies, but what about the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, so people have been talking about savory products for 10 years. And if you look at the data, even though everybody talks about savory products and many people have tried savory products, they are a blip on the screen. And so the question is why? It's not personally, ironically, because we make sweets. I'm not really a sweets person myself. I like salty things. But when you look at sort of the dynamics of savory things, and you look at how we consume savory things, so my answer is a combination of consumer preference and regulation, to cut to the chase. But what happens here is that, you know, that old Lay's potato chip, nobody can eat just one. That is the thing with savory things. Nobody wants to eat just one. So the way, for example, in Colorado that it works is that if you have a multi-dose, product like 10 gummies, 10 milligrams each, 100 milligrams, they each have to be marked separately. So if you're going to have a satisfying savory experience, what you're going to have to end up doing is probably coming out with extremely microdosed products so that somebody could have a satisfying experience of eating 10 or 20 potato chips, but it still can only add up to 10 milligrams, right? Because it's just not, it's simply not practical to have, you're not going to eat one 10 milligram potato chip, and you're also not going to really be able to package 100 milligrams of potato chips when each of them are 100 milligrams. So you have practical manufacturing constraints, practical production constraints, and then just, how consumers, choose to consume products. So that's, in my opinion, there are some good savory products on the market. I love Love's Oven, which is a wonderful Colorado brand, has a delicious cracker that I absolutely love. They're 1 milligrams each. A whole container of them has 10 of them. You can eat 10 of them and only get 10 milligrams. But there are just some practical constraints to savory products just because of how we as consumers tend to think about eating them.
Cool. Thank you for the in-depth answer. Appreciate that.
Maybe too in-depth.
No, that's great though. I bought one cracker once and it was, I think, 5 milligrams. And then you're right though. I ate the cracker and I was like, I'm like, do I eat some cheese with it? Like I didn't know what to do after. So I agree. I never really thought about that.
But perhaps because of vitamins, we're all completely used to eating one gummy, right? Nobody says like, what? I only get to eat one gummy. We're kind of used to that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Consumerism, we want to go with, that's when I was looking at different beverages, and there's some that have like lower THC limits. I'm liking that now because I want to drink a whole beverage. I don't want to have like a sip and then put it aside for a while. Yeah.
Really interesting. And then
it's Jean. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I notice even in the little logo of your backdrop that you're calling everything gummies. Do you refer to jellies at all? Because like I'm really into the jellies that to me are just so beautiful. So what about that? Do you call everything gummies versus jellies?
Well, as always in cannabis, part of the answer to that is regulatorily driven. So for example, in certain states, Maryland being one of them, we're not allowed to call them gummies, we call them chews. right? So part of what you call them is just a function of what the state has decided you can call them. If you look at the quote unquote gourmet gummies, the pâte à fruits and those kind of things, the ingredients are the same as gummies. You can call them whatever you like. So it's mostly a naming. It's what you call them, really. There's not a lot of, there's some that are made with fruit juice rather than flavorings, but at the end of the day, they all have about the same amount of sugar. They have about the same nutritional component. We're actually about to switch to a organic formulation with tapioca syrup. We're taking the high fructose corn syrup out of our gummies. So maybe we should be giving them some French name, but we're going to continue.
That's cool. And are you finding one sells more than others? In other words, the jelly type product, does that sell greater than the traditional gummies, what I'd call a gummy?
Well, no, we have, we have, hang on one sec, my computer is running out of battery here. No, there's, first of all, most of them are called gummies, and all of the leading brands are called gummies. I'm not aware of any quote unquote jellies that are popular brands. I could be missing it, but I don't know of any. Yeah.
Beyond the sugar component for gummy, jelly, pate, whatever you want to call it, or organic, have you noticed, or have you tried to see if there's a differentiating factor beyond, like, saying you could call it vegan if it doesn't have horse hooves or whatever else in to make the jelly and it has fruit pectin, but you could also take that same phrase and say it's kosher or it's halal. So do you find that certain labels or certain phrases sell your product better than putting it another way, religious versus health wise, if it's the same results?
Well, those are not labels. You have to be, we actually our Wana Wellness Kitchen is actually kosher certified. You actually have to have a rabbi come and.
Right, I know that. I'm from a Jewish town, but but it's still the same ingredients, regardless of the religious blessing. Halal versus a vegan versus a Jew, kosher is more or less the same ingredient list aside from the blessings. Yeah,
the ingredients don't. Well, they would change. I think you couldn't have. So our gummies actually are made with pectin, so they are vegan. I don't know because we don't have gelatin gummies. I haven't been through the kosher certification process, but I would imagine you'd have to prove that there's no pork products in the gelatin. Yep. I would guess that would be part of the
certainly.
Process.
Plus Gummies made a point of differentiating. They differentiated originally on low sugar, on being kosher halal, and having natural fruit juices. Those were their kind of, and then they went into the micro dosing when they launched, 5 or 6 years ago? Mm-hmm. And that was the first in California. I know you guys have done a lot of good stuff too, so I just figured you would have a similar practice.
We have not honestly gotten any feedback at all on the kosher piece of it. That I'm aware of. There isn't that large a Jewish population in Colorado, so we might not see it as much in the Colorado market. But I think that kosher also just stands for quality. And I think that having the kosher certification is meaningful to people, even those who do not abide by kosher standards. I think it's still important to certain people just as a quality measure. So I'm certainly interested in doing it just on that front because it actually was a good process to go through just in terms of, making sure that you've got everything just as buttoned down as you could be.
We have just one more question and then we'll let you free, Nancy. You've been so generous with your time and your insights and your information. So this has been amazing. So this is from Mark. Can you expand on your comment about shifting away from CBD? Is this a lack of overall understanding of THC as a medicine, or do you think it's more towards minor cannabinoids? Why that shift?
Shifting away from CBD?
That's what his question said. So
okay, I'm not.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to just ask that a little more in depth?
I don't remember what I said that would indicate that we're shifting away from CBD.
I think maybe just the general market, moving away from just CBD products and moving into other cannabinoids maybe during our discussion. Mark?
Hey, Mark, you're unmuted if you want to ask your question a little further. All right. So are you working with other cannabinoids down the?
We are.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with that one.
But I will make a comment, if I may, about whether the quote unquote market is moving away from CBD. I think what might be confusing to people is that we had, the Farm Bill passed, yay, CBD is legal, and everybody and their brother went rushing headlong into CBD. And then the FDA basically put the brakes on and said, yeah, but we haven't actually approved it as a food supplement. So that really meant that mainstream food retail outlets, by and large, have been pretty conservative about bringing edible CBD products in. So if there's a pulling back on CBD, I think it's more in response to the regulatory grayness of it, not anything inherent to the CBD itself. But I'm not sure what I said exactly. So I hope I'm responding to the right thing.
All right. Well, with that said, Nancy, thank you. Kim, thank you.
Everybody for coming.
Yeah. And Jacqueline, thank you.
Thanks so much,
Really
Nancy.
enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And everybody go out and buy Wana right now.
I am.
Legally. Yeah. All right.